Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, our Let's Play series against XTRG. Yet another turn, or another day, another turn, and we're into March of 1942. It is March 4th of 1942. We're powering through the first week of March, sprinting our way toward the summer of 1942, where hopefully things can start going a little bit better for the Allies. We are trying to set up defensive lines in the South Pacific in and around Fiji, and then expanding to the east out toward Palmyra and Christmas Islands. That's my hoped defensive line, that he will, if he ends up striking, that he ends up striking that he doesn't end up bypassing us and going deep into the heart of the South and Central Pacific, but we'll see. With that being said, things are... I wouldn't say they're going poorly. I know I always sort of start these videos off lamenting like, oh my goodness, we're doing so bad. In some places we are, right? Like we've lost New Caledonia. We're probably about to lose Port Moresby in the next week or less. But there are positives as well. We've done much better than the Allies historically did in Singapore, right? And I think a lot of players do, depending on how skilled the Japanese player is. Sometimes you can sort of strike early and cut the Allies off and take Singapore real early. But generally speaking, we're probably going to hold Singapore. What did it fall in the second week of February or something like that? So we're approaching a full month slower in Singapore than historically was the case. He hasn't landed on the island of Java yet. He hasn't landed on Sumatra yet. I think that's coming very soon. But again, I think he's behind on both of those landings as well. He's way ahead in the South Pacific. He's taken Espiritu Santo. He's taken New Caledonia, places that Japan never even historically took. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with the delay that we forced at Singapore. And more than the delay, I was talking to Neuhauser in sort of the off-stream conversation. By the way, he's bombarding Palmyra here. Doesn't look like it's the precursor to an invasion, but he has brought some cruisers in to bombard the defenses there. You can see our coastal guns are firing back. Not going to take a heavy cruiser out with 4-inch guns, but you might batter around the superstructure enough that forces him to pull back and have them repair or something like that. You can see we're mostly just taking damage. We're not shooting back a whole lot, but it does look like we got at least one hit in on that first lead heavy cruiser. Really wish I had succeeded in mining the port before he got in here. I thought I had issued orders to a bunch of destroyer minesweepers to lay mines, but I think they laid them at Christmas Island and at Johnston Island, and I think Palmyra is the one island they didn't land them at. Would be great if he decides to sweep south and try to bombard Christmas Island and strike a mine out there. That would be awesome. But doesn't look like that's the case here. It is saying 208 casualties, 1 squad destroyed, both non-combatants and of infantry. 24 disabled and 9 disabled. That's not too bad, though, at the end of the day. I don't think that's a meaningful degradation of our strength there. One shell hit on one of his heavy cruisers, and so there's that. But as I was saying, I'm pretty pleased with the delay that we forced in Singapore. The other thing is, as I was sort of chatting about, we have inflicted a great degree of casualties on his forces at Singapore. I think the math we did is like he's lost over 300 squads of infantry destroyed there. He's basically lost an entire infantry division destroyed in the assault on Singapore. Way worse than the Japanese did historically. Now, obviously the Japanese have a much stronger economy and the ability to recover in ways that they couldn't historically. So purely rating history against reality is not a huge thing. But I do think it's relevant in some sense. We at the end of the day, the troops that he has at Singapore, I'm hoping that at least a full division and several of the regiments that are attacking are so beat up that he's going to have to rest them before launching another campaign for at least a couple of weeks, and that could buy us some more time, like in Burma or in the Dutch East Indies. But we'll see. Okay, you can see more Japanese fighter sweeps over Java. We'll fast forward through some of this stuff. A lot of recon going on. American bombers are going after his cruisers here, so you can see 11 PBY Catalinas and 2 B-18 Bolos going after his heavy cruiser, the Aoba. which apparently is smoking, by the way. So that shell hit did some kind of damage. It's at least noticeable damage to the aircraft that are trying to bomb it. Unfortunately, none of the bombers that we have here are really any good at knocking out enemy ships. We don't have torpedo ammunition. I was reading the rules, and I thought that that you could draw torpedoes from a base force unit, even if it wasn't like... So it seems like the game basically says you have to have an air headquarter to have torpedoes, but I thought the rules imply that you can actually draw torpedoes from a base force unit as well, depending on the supply level. But maybe that's not true. In any event, this attack was entirely futile. 5 Catalinas damaged, 1 destroyed, no bomb hits on either of his heavy cruisers there. Interestingly enough, the heavy cruisers didn't have any kind of fighter screen or anything like that. Dutch bombers going after a Japanese heavy cruiser southwest of Bandersjasmen here. You can see it's the Miyoko operating here in the Java Sea. Another 6 coming in here. Those first 3 did no damage. These 6 are coming in against the same Japanese heavy cruiser. Sojo8788, thank you very much for the Prime subscription. Appreciate it, dude. Okay, so no damage there from the 139s. 3 more Bolos are going out against his heavy cruiser bombardment task force. Also looks like another one of his task forces is now east of Palmyra. You can see those Bolos did no damage, suffered damage themselves. And here we go, guys. We've got a Japanese carrier strike off the east coast of Australia. It looks like a pretty good-sized strike. This has got to be the Kiributai, or the mini Kibo Butai. You can see here there's some Kates coming in. They're going after our cruiser mine layer, the Dutch cruiser mine layer that we pulled out of the Dutch East Indies. They're putting multiple torpedoes into this ship. I don't think she's going to survive. It looks like they're from the Suiho, based off that air group report there. They're also going after some destroyers that we had escorting the cruiser mine layer. Fortunately, destroyers are very maneuverable and don't seem as likely to get hit by torpedoes. More planes approaching from the port side. Oh, wait a minute. These are from Akagi. So this is the mini Kido Butai, but they also apparently have some fleet carriers here. So I saw reports of Akagi and Suiho. There's 53 fighters and escorts, 17 there are 43 Kates and 53 Zeros. I don't think all of the Japanese light carriers have Kates either. I could be wrong on that. But that's a lot of torpedo bombers. That's, what, probably 3 groups of torpedo bombers. Some of them reported as coming in from Suiho. Some of them reported as coming in from Akagi. So he must have broken up his major fleet carrier elements to some degree. I don't know how much, but I would guess, based on the numbers, he's got 4 or 5 fleet carriers east near Palmyra, and then he's got 1 or 2 fleet carriers, or certainly at least 1, at least Akagi, and then the rest of the mini Kido Butai out here east of Australia, which in theory could be an opportunity for us to engage him. Unfortunately, my fleet carriers are way far away, but if my fleet carriers were in the area, that would be a target that I would be willing to engage, but it is, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Who knows if he even would have deployed this force here if we hadn't struck at Singapore and he didn't know our fleet carriers were elsewhere. Sorry, Lycogeman, I didn't scroll down, but I think I can look at the combat report and see all that same information. Alright, so there's some destroyers here east of Bandersjasmen, as well as the heavy cruiser here that our Dutch bombers are futilely attempting to hit. Interesting that he doesn't have a cap over these guys. I'm curious if that's an invasion task force that might be skirting Borneo and going for the Dutch East Indies here in Java, or if it's a formation that's pulling out of Bandersjasmen after supporting the landing there. Not sure which. We damaged a Kate with flak. More Catalinas here. Apparently one of our Catalinas is claiming it hit a Japanese destroyer to the east of Palmyra with bombs. I somewhat doubt that. Abdicom? Do you mean the Abda headquarters? Grim? Okay. Recon all over the place. The Abda cruisers are largely in Australia. We've pulled pretty much all those heavy cruisers down to Australia. I'm not going to charge carriers with just heavy cruisers. XZ, yes, we just started. That's weird to say hit if they don't mean a hit, Pat. Okay, we've got more submarine action here. This sub's getting depth charged off Tulagi. The Japanese are landing forces at Tarkin here. So you remember Tarkin was sort of a defensive bastion of ours that we were, not defensive bastion, but it was a supply bastion where we were running supplies into Mindanao and Luzon. That's obviously not the case anymore. But we've got some coastal guns here giving some good account of themselves, striking that Japanese transporter cargo ship multiple times. 75 millimeters striking this guy quite a few times. Another 75 millimeter in there, another 75 millimeter in there. I don't think a 75 millimeter is going to do much in the way of damage to a ship like that, but 122 millimeter might. 122 millimeter shell right into the side of a Japanese troop transport there. 75s continue to plaster the Tenru Maru. Probably not enough to turn any kind of invasion or landing force back, but maybe we'll sink this guy. That's a lot of shells into this cargo ship. We don't get a lot of Japanese cargo ships that we hit very well. He moved some patrol boats in to try and counter the artillery battery there. You can see the bombardment did very little. We lost 1 non-combatant squad and 2 disabled. He got 17 shell hits into the side of the Tenru Maru. It doesn't say heavy damage. It just says heavy fire, so she may survive yet still. We also put 1 shell hit into the... Oh, wait, no, the 27 casualties were what we inflicted. Never mind. The AP Kamu Maru took 1 shell hit from 120 millimeter. She's on fire. You can see we had 120 millimeter coastal guns and 75 millimeter coastal guns doing work there, firing defensive fire. The patrol boats were obviously not really helping at all. We suffered no casualties. Only 27 on his end. Probably means he'll get the men ashore without too much damage. You can see he's unloading over the beach now. No casualties there. 12 support troops lost from landing during the unload. It's a Naval Guard unit here. 81st Naval Guard unit is what's landing here. Centimeter. I thought they said the guns said they were millimeters. Okay. All right, so Japanese deliberate attack here at Singapore. This seemed like a relatively quiet turn here, but he's going to make another effort at Singapore. Now, we can get an estimate of the sort of the shape that his troops are in. We can see the Imperial Guards Division is below 60 assault value, so this division is pretty wrecked for any future operations. He'll need to rest them for a couple of months or just take huge casualties anytime he involves them. The 5th Division, I don't know if that's new or not, but that guy's got a huge assault value there, 458. That's a very strong unit here. The 18th and the 21st have suffered moderate damage. The 21st not a ton. I think they usually have around 320 to 420 to 430 in the way of assault value. They're at 398. The 18th Division is obviously substantially weaker than that by more than a fifth. So they've taken some damage. 14th Independent Regiment, the 15th Independent Regiment of Engineers, both look like they've been shot up pretty good. 20th as well. I think they're usually around 50 assault value, so the engineers there have taken a lot of casualties. His 15th Independent Regiment has only 1 assault value, so that guy's shattered. His 112th is at about 50% strength. I think they're usually around 110. So that means basically 2 regiments shot up, a division very badly shot up, a couple of engineer regiments badly shot up, and that's about it. Another infantry regiment here at about half strength over here to the right of Singapore. So Singapore's hanging on. We'll see what comes of this attack. We'll fast forward a little bit here. You can see some of the assault value on some of his units is dropping here. The 48th took a lot of casualties. The 5th dropped a bit. The 18th dropped well below 300. The Imperial Guards Division's back below 30 assault value. His infantry regiments all just dropped quite a bit there. You can see his engineers did succeed in reducing the fortifications from level 3 to level 2, so that kind of sucks. That's pretty bad for us. You can see the total assault value of all of those units is 2,000 versus our 947. However, after you factor in level 2 forts, the Japanese assault value drops adjusted to about 1100. Ours increases to about 1600. That's a pretty decent roll for him. I think there's like a ×2 modifier here, so our modifier was slightly off. We could have gone a little higher. He could have gone a little lower on the attack. But at the end of the day, he reduced the fort to level 2. That's a pretty big deal. That hurts for us. That means the next attack will be that much easier. But good news is 1 to 2 odds, which means we got a pretty good roll in terms of squads destroyed. So he lost another 74 infantry squads destroyed, 238 disabled. So 300 squads that were ready to fight are no longer ready to fight. He lost 1 destroyed non-combatant, 72 disabled, 2 engineers destroyed, 44 more disabled, 55 guns lost, 12 of them destroyed, 43 disabled. We lost comparable infantry losses, 74 destroyed, 107 disabled, but the disabled doesn't matter as much because disabled can still fire on defense. We lost 54 non-combatants destroyed, 91 disabled. He did better there. Engineers, 2 to 31, so he did a little bit worse than we did, 2 to 44, but we have fewer engineers to play with, so that hurts us more disproportionately. The area we really suffered in were guns lost. He lost 55, we lost 54, but 21 of ours were destroyed, which is a pretty big loss. That's a lot of guns lost versus 33 disabled. 27 vehicles, 9 destroyed, 18 disabled. I'm guessing that's mostly support troops. We don't really have much in the way of like armor or things like that in Singapore here. So you can see all the different units that were involved in the assault. I think there's some new ones. I haven't really been paying a close attention. I feel like the 5th Division is new, but I could be wrong there. They just seemed really fresh. We didn't lose any units destroyed, so that's good. And you can see here the list of our units that are still here hanging out, still fighting, giving a good account of themselves. My hope is that even though the fort went down a little bit, that we gained enough, we gained time so that he'll delay another attack for a few more days. 1 to 2 assault odds, and losing as many men disabled as he did, I would think would cause him to delay a little bit longer, but we'll see. My real hope is that Singapore can hold out another week. If we get to like March 11th, March 12th, I'll be very happy if that's when Singapore falls. That is a substantial outperformance to history. And would delay other operations of his either into the Dutch East Indies or into Burma that much further. He's got a huge amount of ground forces invested here, and between all of these like 5 divisions he's got here and the 2 divisions we know he's got in Luzon, that's tying down a lot of troops. Japanese deliberate attack here south of Changsha. We had some like isolated corps that's operating back here. He got 3 to 1 assault odds. Our troops apparently did better, though. 83 casualties to 13. Bombardment attack at Tarkin. You can see here got a Naval Guard unit ashore. You can see they've got over 60 assault value, or roughly 60 assault value. We are on the defense, so that does help us a little bit. I should probably turn the bombardment off. We're not going to accomplish anything with 12 guns. We should probably just hunker down for the defensive. Okay, and into the fortification phase. So an interesting turn. There were definitely some actions. We spotted a large Japanese carrier formation off Australia, so I think we've identified, probably, if not all, then the vast majority of Japanese carriers. Chrono Blue, thanks for the follow. And Sojo8788, I can't remember if I said thanks for the sub, but thank you for the sub. That brings us up to 20 subscribers on the channel. That's pretty cool. I just need 5 more subs, and then I can get another emoji. I can get a 3rd emoji, which I'd probably just reuse the Scotch one, which I think is like if you watch the channel, you get like these reward points or things like that. And I think I've got like a third emoji already that's like a Scotch glass, but I could tie it to subs as well. All right, so that does it for the turn. Let's go ahead and jump into the turn where I've already started issuing my order. I mean, some of the Chinese corps don't start out very strong either. I think it's interesting that apparently the game, when it originally came out, what they intended were the Japanese divisions to basically be as strong as brigade. Oh, shit. Sorry, I just like kicked something. I'm pretty sure I broke a picture frame. That was on the ground for some reason. Anyway, I'm pretty sure someone was saying that like originally the way the rules were written is that the Japanese divisions in China should have only been as strong as brigades. I don't know why they didn't patch it, but apparently the game was originally supposed to have Japanese divisions be like a quarter as strong as they are on paper in China, which would have made the Chinese theater a much more difficult task. As it is, though, they didn't end up implementing that, and so Japan is able to kind of typically steamroll China in 1942. But we're doing our best to hold out here. He's obviously taken Changsha. He's driven west toward Chikikang. We've pulled over 500,000 troops. I think it was 500,000 troops. Maybe it was 300,000 troops back to the west of the river here in Chikikang. We are building the fortification up here, so we're actually up to level 3 forts, and we're already up to 20% on the way to level 4. I really want to get this river crossing here to 4, and then what I can do is we've got 5,400 troops, or sorry, 5,400 assault value. We are moving some of that, not very much. I think we're moving like 400 or 500 of that. But I'd like to then be able to pull this 5,400 troops and reposition them slightly based on having very strong forts here, because not only are the fort levels here 3, it's on the other side of a river, so if he crosses, he has to shock attack, and it's a WR, which means that the terrain there is actually forest and rough, which gives a ×3 defensive value. So you get a ×3 defensive value, and you get level 3 forts here. That is just a godsend of a place to defend. It's kind of similar to Changsha, which was, I think, level 3, level 4 forts, and they're urban, which urban, I think, is even slightly better. Yeah, urban. I don't know if it's urban heavy or... No, that was urban light. So that was only a ×2 defensive value. So this would actually be an even better place to fight than Changsha was. Which is interesting. What's Singapore? Is it urban heavy or urban light? I can't. Looks like urban light. What would urban heavy be? Oh, urban heavy would be like some of the Chinese coastal cities, like Hong Kong or Hankow. Interestingly enough, that Chongqing is only urban light, which I think is interesting. But anyway. Okay, so we're going to probably get this up to level 4. Well, maybe we'll get it up to level 5. We've got over 500 engineers here, so that's why it's building up so quickly, but this is the typical Chinese way in this era. Over 500 engineers, over 800 artillery value, but we've got no engineer vehicles, so these guys are like building these forts by hand. But my intention here is to build this up so then I can shift this large number of troops north to this hex, because this is also a ×3 defensive hex, but there's no city here. So rather than attack at Chikikang, I have to imagine if he was to push across the river, he would push across here and attack these troops. Good news, by the way. We had our troops on the other side of this river, and also a forest and rough terrain, but we pulled these troops north across the river, so they're in a slightly more defensible position. That means now if he did try and pursue into this hex, he'd have to shock attack right away into very heavy odds. Additionally, we've got 1,700 assault value here. He might have been able to like deliberate attack or bombard us into submission south of the river, but by falling back to north of the river, I think that gives us a stronger position. Additionally, if he does try and push north, even though I don't have as many troops here, and even though it's not as well as defended as Chikikang, because I've got such a large force here, I could cross the river into his rear, so he could end up needing to, essentially if he advances north, he then has to leave a sizable enough portion of his force behind to stop 4,000 or so assault value coming crushing his flank. I don't think he'll do that, but that's pretty interesting here. Oh, really? Neuhauser, the 5th, has been there since the beginning of February? All right, well, I guess I didn't know that. He must have just avoided the shock attack with them by having a move in afterwards. Meanwhile, so once we do that, then also we can start shifting troops to other portions of the field. You can see he's advancing with these troops up this major river out of Nanyang. We are actually, hopefully we've sprung a trap successfully. We've got 2,000 or 1,500 assault value that is moving east. You can see they're currently at 14 miles. So they moved into this hex this turn. My hope is I can get them into Nanyang, and then we can cut this body of troops off here north with this roadway. We can't retreat from this road here, because then he'll be able to draw supply from the east over from Loyang. But if we can hold this position north here and he advances here, I'm also moving, I think, 1 unit to the hex to the east, so that way if he advances into this hex, he'll be cut off here, cut off back here from supply. And so he might have a little bit of supply that would trickle over from non-existent roadways, but there's no roadway here, so I think he'd be pretty firmly cut off from supply, and we might be able to bag a couple of Japanese brigades that are moving north here near Xi'an. So that's the hope anyway. We also are sort of repositioning some of our forces down here to the south. Now that we're in a better position north here, we are shifting other troops into Quilin. We've already got over 600 assault value here, which is not very much, but Quilin is a wooded terrain, or WD, which means it is level 2 defensive bonus. It's wooded terrain. But in addition to being wooded, it's also got some forts here. It's got level 3 forts. So the hope is that we can, with the 600 troops, we can force him to deploy a couple of divisions here and slow his advance down. I don't think he's going to make a frontal attack in China now. I think he's going to pivot north, pivot south. I think we're seeing that a little bit with the drive at Nanyang. He may bring reinforcements up from Nanyang up from Hankow or from Changsha to stop this flanking maneuver of ours. We'll see. He could also swing south toward Quilin, and that's why we're hoping that we have enough here to defend. Wu Chou is pretty weak. We've only got 2 core elements, so I'm sending the 3rd Chinese Cavalry Corps down here. It'll add another 200 assault value, and I'm sending a couple of other units that had pivoted north to prevent the breakthrough directly into Changsha, south to defend this rail line. This rail line is a delaying tactic. We want to hold out here for a couple of weeks while I build up forts at Tuyan and Queyan. Those are both better defensive terrains, WR and rough. So WR being ×3 and rough being ×2. But in any event, the real hope is that we can build up enough forts here at Tuyan. I'd like to get it to 3 or 4. If he gets past Tuyan, then it's really easy for him to flank because there's more roadway options, right? And if he gets past Tuyan, then he can cut off the rear of Chikikong. So Tuyan is an important bastion in our Chinese defensive position, and we're moving troops there, and then we're hoping our troops at Quilan and other troops in the south can hold out long enough to build the forts up here. Also, there is this roadway north from Quilan, which would put him in the rear of Chikikong as well. But it would be across very difficult terrain, and we could position some troops here. Also, bad, slow roadways. So we could pivot troops south from Chikikong here behind this river in rough terrain, and then we could hold him there for a little bit. So trying to be considerate of our central Chinese defensive position, while strengthening the south a little bit, and trying to maybe pull a little bit of a trap on his troops in the north moving on Xi'an. So, I need to breathe sometimes. That's a lot of speaking in a short period of time. Whoa, okay. Meanwhile, let's check on Singapore. So we saw the deliberate attack at Singapore. You can see our defensive values down below 800. So that was actually a pretty rough attack on our troops. I think our assault value dropped by like 100 roughly about 100. So about 1/8 on that attack. Also, losing the fort does hurt. You can see our supplies got burned up there kind of good too. We were at about 21,000 supplies, I think, before that attack. We're down almost, we're below 18,000 now, so that was a pretty heavy supply usage. We are at 32% trying to build those forts back up. If he continues to bomb us, that could delay us rebuilding those. The only saving grace is once you get into that 1 to 2 fort range, you can build forts very quickly. So my hope is this 32% was all generated this turn, and maybe if he gives us 2 to 3 more days before he attacks again, we can get our fort level back up to 3, probably faster than he can replace his losses, is sort of my thought. Meanwhile, the troops down there, a lot of those units are pretty shot up. You can see the assault values, or the assault values of a lot of these units is down to like 1, 2, 1, 3, 6, 7, etc. So those are starting to take some losses there. I really wish I could pull some of these troops out, like the 22nd or 27th Australian Brigades, but they need to stay in place for now. If I could maybe air out some units that are like lower in assault value, probably not the AA guns because we won't be able to carry those, but like if I could pull out our AHQ Far East fleet, that would be great, although again, their headquarters is restricted, so we can't really do that. Actually, the Far East RAF groups would be nice to try and air out and pull out. They don't really have a purpose here right now, so maybe we should consider doing that. I'm curious here. If I selected, I think it's too short range to select Singapore. It is. If I flew these guys down to where would I want to fly them out of? Maybe out of Medan. If I flew them down to Medan, could I pick up troops from Singapore? Or no, pick up troops. pick up troops from Singapore, and then I want to fly the RAF group out, because those are important, I think, units to have. So if we can pick up the 223 group RAF, that would be great, because then we can get a lot of aviation support. And again, I have almost no headquarters units in Australia that have torpedo ordnances. I think I've got one at Singapore, and it's a static HQ. So I think the intent would be to pull these guys out as best I can, and I can use these guys here and pull them into Medan. Then I can probably get them up to Sabang, and I'm trying to use some Catalinas and stuff like that to get the Abda force out of there. And then I can pull some support units out that I don't think will have a material impact on the defense of Singapore, but could have a very big impact on the defense of Burma and the defense of Australia. So that's my intention there. Hey, Craig Luff, how you doing? Thanks for the follow. So I think that's my thought. And then I can, if I can get them into India or into Burma, I've got plenty of troop transports or other things like that I can sail them south to Australia. So it's definitely something we can do. So we'll try and pull the 223 RAF group out first, and we'll see how effective that can be. This is also a way that we can use our lodestars, which are apparently... I think actually with the lodestar, I was struggling with picking an objective because they didn't have the range to transport anybody to Rangoon, and I was just going to fly them right back. But now I have a purpose for them, so we can do that. I also think I have enough. I don't have any aviation support at Medan. These are all just coastal troops. Well, shit. Let's send these guys down with their aviation support down to Medan. I want to get those engineers down there to support that. And then the Langsa base force will switch over to combat. So that'll get us their aviation support added to Sabang, which is at 23 now. So it was at 15 before. What are the other ground units here? So some of these garrison troops are at strat move. We want to get them into combat move. We're forming a little bit of a bastion in the north here up at Sabang as well. So we'll get these Medan forces south. Honestly, it might not be a bad idea to see if I can't transport a few more transports out of here. These guys are stuck to China command, so I don't think they're free. Although it says they're unrestricted, but I think they're limited to operating in China with that headquarter unit. 223 RAF group down here, though. 221 RAF group. Can we get these guys down to Sabang? They're probably too far away right now. They can get to Port Blair, but they can't quite get to Sabang. So I think we'll fly them into Port Blair first, and then we'll fly them. It is going to it's going to slow down our transferring of supplies into China, but I think it's a better use of our forces down here. So we'll send these DC-2s, I think it was, down to Port Blair, and then we'll move them down to Medan next turn to try and get more of those RAF units out. RAF 221 is in Burma somewhere, I think. I think they might be at Lido. 221 is at Lido. So again, these are their units. These don't even have... I don't understand that. Why would an RAF Group 221, it's an RAF base force unit, doesn't have the ability to support torpedoes, but the RAF units in Singapore do? Like, what's the fundamental difference there? I think it's because these guys are treated as an engineer unit, and I think it's because the other guys are treated as a headquarter unit, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But okay. But yeah. Can you form army units in Sabang? Form units in Sabang? What do you mean by form units? Oh, merge. I don't think so. Maybe. Oh, we can. So once these guys get unpacked, then we can form the NS KNLL Territory Regiment. So we can form a regiment in Sabang there with some of those forces. We can also merge the base forces if we get them all to the same place. Some of them are at Bengkalis, which is... I think we're moving these guys to Palembang, by the way. It's unfortunate that there's not a rail line south to Palembang, because I'd rather make my stand there. But... alas. Sean Mack, it's not about needing an air HQ to put torpedoes on planes. It's about needing the supply and the support to maintain the torpedoes, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the logic is. Torpedoes were kind of a luxury in some places. Meanwhile, I moved some Blenheim IFs into Singapore. He did that nighttime bombing raid against Singapore 2 turns ago. So I've decided to move our Blenheim IFs into Singapore. We're going to do a cap level 100 this turn to get all 7 up into the air. They're ordered to fly at night. They're going to do cap at 15,000. I'm hoping that maybe he's going to be, now that he's seen our air units have pulled out of Singapore, he may not bomb at night. He may bomb during the day. But it'd be great if we could hit some bombers that he's set to nighttime bombing attack with some night fighters. That would be cool. I have base forces in Batavia. I got multiple base forces. I've got the Bendo Bus base force. I've got the Batavia base force. I've got a bunch of base forces already in Batavia. You can see here they're not building the forts super fast, but they're building it. It's faster than 1%. They're up to 51% now. I think they're building it 4 or 5% per turn. I should really stop expanding the Air Force capacity. There's no reason to do that. That just helps him. Also, by stopping the Air Force capacity, my engineers no longer have to support that, so that should speed up the fort building a little bit. We see this task force here moving west. It says CS, CS, CS. That means they're float planes, but I think we actually saw cruisers and destroyers. What I don't know is if these guys are an invasion force that could be moving west. If they are moving west, they could be landing at Kaldaji, or they could be landing at Sermariang, or it may just be a patrol force into Java Sea trying to detect our carriers. I don't think he got any detection over our carriers last turn. We may have given our position away a little bit. I think we were flying ASW raids, and we may have spotted this Japanese sub here, which is apparently moving west. If we're out ahead of the subs, I don't think there's a very big risk that the subs will catch us. But I should probably stand these guys down, or at least get them off of... Well, they're currently set to search. I don't want to give away my position. I haven't yet. All he knows is that somewhere in this area we've detected a sub. From a carrier plane, probably, but I don't want to stop the search, because if he does move a force west to try and intercept us, that would be pretty crappy if we didn't know about it. So I'll leave the search orders on for at least one more turn. So the cat's not out of the bag, Pat. The cat's out of the bag in the sense that he knows our carriers are in the Indian Ocean. I think this is the Indian Ocean. What he doesn't know is that he doesn't know where our carriers are. He could think we're moving north. He could think we're moving south. I would rather him honestly think that we're moving north into the Bay of Bengal, because that might delay any plans he has going for Palembang. It might delay any plans he has going for Port Blair or for Rangoon. It could do us some good for him to be uncertain at this point where our carriers are retiring to. That's the important thing, I think. Meanwhile, we've gotten almost all of our fighter aircraft out of Singapore. You can see here there's 2 Wildcats still repairing in Singapore. Everybody else is out. We have 1 Fulmer, and we've got 1 Wildcat currently at Batavia. I don't plan to fly them west to join the fleet. In fact, I just moved these guys from Singapore this turn, this 1 F4F. So the 1 F4F and Fulmer are going to fly cap over our tanker at Oosthaven, which is completely detected. I plan to sail it south. These guys may get sunk by enemy air, certainly possible, or by enemy task forces if these guys are moving west to engage. But the hope is to pull a little bit more oil out of the Dutch East Indies, while also being a slight diversion, right? Like if he sees these guys, maybe that occupies his recon craft from not seeing our carriers or something, because they are in the way. Meanwhile, we also have another tanker here at Tigilap. Our light cruiser De Ruyter and Nestor have both joined up with it, so we will send them all together. They're almost full of fuel. Once they're full of fuel, they'll pull back to Perth, and if they both make it, we can bring a total of 11,000 fuel and oil into Australia. If neither of them make it, then we lose like 20 victory points. Not the end of the day. end of the. But anyway, I'm trying to get the Deroiter back. We did refuel the Deroiter, so we pulled about 1,000 fuel out of Tijilap and put it on the Deroiter. So in addition to the 11,000 we're putting on the tankers, the ships in this area also have replenished slightly. Also, having the light cruiser with the tanker means if he sprints some other sort of formation in at us, then we've got a chance to have at least a defense against him. I thought, where did my light cruiser? Oh, the Van Hemmersek, by the way, joined up with the fleet here. So you can see the Dutch light anti-aircraft cruiser did join up with the task force here, along with, I think there was a destroyer with it as well. So she was coming out of Colombo. So that's good news. Also, the 7th Australian Division is moving south to Australia. Again, my thought is Burma could be vulnerable, and so could India. And I was tempted to put the 7th into India while we put the 6th into Australia, but I decided to concentrate my forces in Australia. India is big enough with enough big bases that I think if he does make a play for India, I can try and reinforce it before it falls. Australia is a little bit weaker, a little bit more remote, a little bit more difficult to do that with the current supply lines. Also, we do get a fair number of reinforcements in the next month or so at Aden and Abadan that we could push into India as well. Additionally, I also decided, so these guys are moving south. The bulk of the 7th Division is in this task force. They only have 2 destroyer escorts, but knowing what he knows about the fact that we're shipping convoys and things like that south, I'm going to have the battleship Revenge, heavy cruiser Dorsetshire, light cruiser Emerald, and 3 destroyers meet up with these guys, join that task force, and they'll provide heavy escort over these troops. They will stay well west outside of enemy air cover, but in the event that he sends a surface raider in, I want to make sure that we've got them well covered. Co-evoking, maybe the CLA would be a hindrance for this CV task force. You're right, they could slow them down if they need to refuel underway replenishment. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it could send them into Tijilap, but I feel like there'd be a risk they'd get sunk there by enemy Bettys or something. You are right, though. It is pretty short range. But the destroyers are pretty short range too, right? Like, you've got to slow down to refuel the destroyers too. I thought the Nizam was with it. But these guys are going to probably have to refuel in the next day or so, which is going to slow their progress south, use up their op points. Meanwhile, we have tankers running to join the carriers. Not these guys. Those are tankers that just unloaded at Perth. We also have this surface task force of 3 light cruisers and some destroyers shielding the northwest corner of Australia in the event he does any kind of surface raid in there. We have 2 Dutch tankers. They're small tankers, light tankers. I think between the 2, they don't even carry enough fuel to completely refuel a carrier, but certainly would help with some of the auxiliaries and other things like that. The 3,000 on these 2 tankers is racing north to meet up with these guys. I think we should actually issue orders for them to meet. So clear that waypoint, meet task force, meet these carriers. So they're going to head north here. They won't meet there. They'll meet somewhere further south. And then we also have another task force here, which carries more fuel. This group has 9,600 fuel on board this fleet oiler, the Trinity, which is coming out of Perth as well. And so we will attempt to meet this task force also. These guys would have enough fuel on this guy to, I think, fuel fully two fleet carriers. So between the 2 groups, we've got about, 13,000 fuel that we can load up, which, while not enough to completely replenish everything, certainly would be enough to replenish, I think, 3 of the fleet carriers. Or maybe not quite, but they're also not going to be totally empty either. So I'm thinking the 13,000 fuel from these guys should give our fleet carriers enough fuel to take a wide berth off the west coast of Perth and then swing around to the Australian east coast, probably stopping at Melbourne, well south of any of his movements there. Meanwhile, at Perth, the 6th Australian Division is pretty well unloaded. You've got a couple of these guys still have some fuel. I guess this cargo ship still has 66% of its units still loaded up. 120 motorized support, so they need a lot of port operation points there. I don't know if that's actually a thing. I just made it up. But whatever the equivalent of that is, 56 motorized support here. I think almost the whole division is off. It's just the motorized support, so the trucks and other things like that. Does look like we've got some artillery pieces left still, 12 25-pounder guns, 4 Marmon Harrington armored cars, 105 support, and 41 motorized support. So they've still probably got a couple more days to unload the division there. The other task force here has elements of the division as well. They're not docked, so they're going to have a harder time unloading. 25-pounder guns, 4 Marmon Herons, 20 motorized support, and regular support. The actual infantry troops are all off the boats, though. You can see here the 6th Australian Division, 323 squads ready. One of them is disabled of AIF infantry sections, 45 Bren sections, 36 combat engineers. All of those troops are at full strength. Most of actually more than the TOE of Vickers sections are offloaded. 36 anti-tank guns of 72 of the TOE. I don't know if we actually have. I didn't see any anti-tank guns still on the ships, so it may be under strength there. 36 40-millimeter Bofors. Those look like pretty darn good anti-aircraft guns. 54 mortars. We do have 40 of our 25-pound artillery pieces off. 8 of our Marmon Herons, 30 engineers, 3 engineer vehicles. You can see these guys in pretty good shape of their offloading. Just mainly the support. Yeah, I would expect this division to be on par, if not better than some of the Japanese divisions. I think these guys, when completely offloaded, will be, in terms of experience, they will be on par with the Japanese. I think in terms of equipment, they might actually be slightly superior to a Japanese division. The Allied divisions tend to be much more heavily equipped. Now, he will probably outnumber them. The other thing is these Australian divisions tend to be kind of glass jaws in the sense that their replacement pools are so bad that if you get into a battle with them and they get badly handled, it can take you a long, long time to replenish all of your losses, whereas the Japanese have a much easier time replenishing their losses. We have another similar division on the way south from Australia, the 7th Australian Division. It's on a bunch of different transports, but it's a similar division. It's got 61 experience, 88 morale, 300-plus AIF sections, almost an identical division, slightly less experience coming out of the Middle East as well. They're about to make a fuel stop at Colombo. We're going to have those battleships meet up with them, and then we're going to sail them well far west of any feasible Japanese air recon to move into Perth. And, this is one of those things where he made a play with his carriers in the Eastern Pacific. So as much as it may hurt him or hurt me that he knows where my carriers are, the flip side is also true, that because we know his carriers are off the east coast of Australia and in the Eastern Pacific, it's very unlikely he could send anything that would hinder this convoy and put 2 divisions at sea at risk. If he had sent his carriers west here, he could have thrown off the resupply of Australia from the west. So I think that's pretty good. So that's the situation there. We already looked at Singapore. We already looked at Burma. We already looked at China. Cursory look at Bataan. You can see here we've got a lot of troops. We've got a lot of troops currently in Bataan. They're all cut off, but they still have a good amount of supply, 21,000 supply at Bataan with almost 1,900 assault value. We're still hanging out on Mindanao. We've got a Japanese formation here that keeps attacking and keeps getting bloodied pretty badly. We still have one really good regiment here, the 102nd Filipino Regiment. Their morale sucks and their experience sucks, but they've been giving the Japanese hell. Supply is almost out there. Those troops won't last very long, but for the moment, everybody has enough supply that they're not red, which would be good. 282 assault value still there, level 2 fortifications. So that's what we're doing. I am building forts, or I'm trying to anyway. Other than that, I'm really curious what this task force is here, if they're really moving west. I have ordered some subs to Semarang. I've also ordered our PT boats to move into the Java Sea in the hopes that they can move to Semarang, and then maybe if he strikes anywhere along this coast that we could try and hit those guys. Part of me wonders if he's not going to move like some of these guys west of Java to really try and hunt down our carriers or something, but could also be a landing force. He's taken Timor. Not a lot else to report there. We still have 258,000 fuel at Perth. I think everybody's unloaded. Well, everybody who had fuel has unloaded. These guys are headed back to Colombo as well. Meanwhile, we've got more troops arriving at Perth next turn, so we really got to get those Australian boys off the transports to free the docks up for a light anti-aircraft battery, a British anti-tank battery that are both coming in. So we've got the 85th British anti-tank and the 48th Light AA, both on their way into Perth as well. We're building Australia up as much as we feasibly can, and the reason we're doing that is because Port Moresby is down to level 1 forts, and he's attacking with full division here. Last time he got 1-to-1 odds. The 45th Indian Brigade's the only thing that's sort of holding us in place. Not a very good brigade. The Port Moresby Brigade is also trying to help, but all these guys are low experience. We're heavily outnumbered, heavily outgunned. It's just a matter of logistics that are sort of allowing him to hang out for a little bit longer. Craig Luff, thanks for the follow, by the way. I think I thanked you already, and Like a G-Man also, thanks for the bits. That's appreciated. So that's the situation there. Moresby's going to fall. There's not a whole lot I can do to stop that. The good news is if Moresby falls, it does give him a bombing. He can head out to, like, is it down to Townsville? How far can he hit? Townsville's only 14 away? Jeez, that's closer than I thought. So his G3Ms can reach pretty far. He can probably hit everything north of Bowen. Is Cloncurry close enough? I thought these guys were a little bit further out. Cloncurry's probably safe, but he can hit all the way down to Charterstown. He can hit Townsville. He can hit Bowen with his bombers there, I think, anyway. If we take a look at the aircraft database, that's the ships. Aircraft database. I don't know how far the Sallies have. He's been reluctant to use G3Ms on strat bombing, despite their ridiculous range. The Sally 2A can hit out to 12 hexes. So his army bombers, I don't think, can hit quite as far. 12 hexes. 12 hexes. So his army bombers probably can't hit from Moresby. No, they can't. So at extended range, he can't even hit as far as Townsville with his army bombers. He could use Sallies, so he could definitely shut down shipping. But if he's not willing to use his Sallies in strategic bombing, he can only hit out to Cairns. Meanwhile, the Zeros have out to roughly 14, I think it is, at extended range, which is enough to get just shy of Charterstown. So he can establish air supremacy over Townsville or Cairns. He could definitely move his troops down into Cairns and then land his troops at Cairns. We did lay mines at Cairns last turn, not many of them, with that cruiser mine layer that got sunk 2 turns ago. So we've got 43 defensive mines there. It's not enough, but we can try and bring subs in here to thicken up the minefield a bit. I think the likely landing points for him is either Cooktown to establish an Air Force base on the northern edge of Australia that can then extend his influence south, or he could just go straight for, which would basically be unopposed, or he could go directly south on Cairns and take that base with both a port and an air base where he can support the drive south. He could also go for Palm Island. That seems unlikely. It's underdeveloped. Not likely. Townsville's another option. Cairns or Townsville, I think, would be the most likely landing points. I am pivoting. I did have my strategic reserve here at Wagga Wagga. I'm actually moving it up to Toowoomba. I don't think he'd land as far south as Brisbane because then we'd get a bunch of emergency reinforcements. But I'm moving these guys down here, up here, just in case. There's a whole bunch of divisions that are going to form up at Toowoomba. The reason I'm moving them there is I don't want to move them further north because the rail lines, if I landed at Rockhampton, he landed south at Bundaberg or at Maryborough, then my troops would essentially be cut off from easy resupply or from the troops in the south. So I want to keep the strategic reserve in the south. We can rail him north to whatever point he lands at. But any of these points north of Moresby or north of Brisbane are hypothetical places he could land, and he could also use the air cover off New Caledonia at extreme range for his bombers to support. The problem is, even at Comac, which is a little bit closer, he's more than 14 hexes out, so he'd need to bring his aircraft carriers in to provide air cover for his bombers. Otherwise, they'd probably just get chewed up. So as I'm sort of talking through this and thinking through this, I think the actual, if he were to invade Australia, which I don't know if he intends to, but if he were to invade Australia, I think Cairns would be the most likely objective because he could still have zero support. I think with fuel tanks even, he'd be inside normal range or right at about that, with potentially Cooktown as a longer-term play and then driving south. The other obvious option is for him to land Darwin. We've got a fair number of units here, not a lot of assault value, but a fair number of units here at Darwin. We probably should pull them back to Catherine, which would actually be smarter, and then we can rush him in once he lands, because the Japanese get some pretty big bonuses on amphibious assaults, so we might actually be better off keeping the reserves at Catherine, then when he lands, race them north to engage him once he's already ashore. We did form some PT boats up at Darwin as well. Yes, Sean, I see you've got 51 viewers right now. That's a pretty good showing. I think we had like 67 at some point in our stream the other night, so that was pretty cool too. The troops north of Cloncurry, where are we looking? Oh, these guys are going to Catherine, so I am sending a few brigades to Catherine to reinforce it. I want to get this up to about 500 assault value here, so that between the two we've got like 2 divisions worth of troops. Again, I don't think Darwin's the play, though. Darwin's value to Japan is only 90. It's so far north and isolated that, yes, he could base air units there, and he could even more effectively control the Timor Sea, but there's no shipping in the Timor Sea right now. He could take these northern bases, but like it's worth 90 victory points. Broome is worth 70. Derby is worth 30. New Barkin is worth 20. Like, I don't see the point of that landing. I don't see the point of making that play. Cairns is worth 60. Townsville is worth 90. Charterstown is worth 80. Bowdoin is only worth 10, but then Rockhampton is worth 225. Mayborough 40. Charlesville is 20. I just think like if he really wants to try and take Australia and knock it out of the war, it makes a lot more sense to go for the East Coast. And now that he's already got New Caledonia and that the Coral Sea is already sort of his wheelhouse for his air cover, that would make a lot more sense if that's the route he's going. The other option is invading Burma, which by taking both these Australian divisions south to Australia does weaken the Burma front. But it's certainly possible. Yeah, I mean, so taking Darwin is definitely a good defensive play because it delays my ability to bomb the Dutch East India oil fields. So that's definitely something he could do. I'm not worried about that because our ability to effectively launch a heavy bombing campaign against the Dutch East Indies with long-range bombers with a sufficient enough to do real damage is probably a ways out still. So I guess that is something we could consider moving our B-17s like into Batavia if the airfield was, though airfield's probably not big enough. It's too far away too, 21 hexes. What about Palembang? 18 hexes? Yeah, all these guys are too far away. Really the only option would be to base them at Singapore, which is, asking for trouble, and then hitting Miri, which is the only oil field, well, Miri and Balikpapan, I guess, are the oil fields of note right now. We could hit Balikpapan from... do any of our bombers, by the way, have that kind of range? 9. 18. Let's do that. Let's do... Oh, I can't bomb with you because you're a float plane. There's no city attack. I think I need the city attack option, right? That's unfortunate. It would have been nice to launch some harassing strikes on his oil producing facilities. We could do the Hudsons. No, they don't have the range. They're 10. Surabaya is 12. Huh. That's unfortunate. High altitude sweeping P-38s. I hear the Tojo is a good counter to the P-38, but I'm not sure. In any event, moving further south, That's the situation on Australia. We did get our heavy cruisers. Thank God, by the way, that we moved. You remember we had a force of heavy cruisers that were just sitting up here, and then we moved them south, and we were going to move them to Brisbane, and I decided, you know what, we found out that he had G3Ms here, which can basically hit out to here with torpedoes, and so I said, I don't want anything to do with my surface vessels being up here. We'll move them down to Melbourne just to be safe. So our 6 heavy cruisers made it down south to Melbourne. I feel like they're relatively safe there. You can see here the heavy cruisers, 5 of them, and then I think we sent 1 into the dockyard. It'll be there for about a week, the Louisville, repairing some damage there. But we got them out. One area he might try, it does say his carriers are moving northwest, but there's a chance he could try and hit this troop transport that he spotted. I think it's already been somewhat damaged. So this guy's moving to Brisbane. We'll move him at flank speed to try and get him there more quickly. He has subs all along the route, so he could try and torpedo them and do some damage there. The one thing that we do have going for us, if he doesn't spot and torpedo them, is I did move some P-40s. They're crappy P-40s with horrible crews, 34 experience, and they have to be removed in like 10 days. But we are running a 70% cap over this task force, so maybe we'd surprise some Kates or whatever and get shredded ourselves, but buy our ship some time. I also did move a second P-40 group into Brisbane as well. Also, they expire in about 10 days. I don't see them on here. I thought I moved them in here. Maybe I moved them by rail from Sydney, so you can't see them right now. I also did get some actual good fighter planes that came in with the 7th Division. They were at Perth, and we're transferring those 16 Hurricanes to Sydney via rail. We're also flying or transferring some Blenheim 4s into this area as well. So that's something else to consider. Pooch, what airfields? Sean Mack. Poach the P-40s. I would do that before we lose them, but I don't want to poach them right now. That's 50 aircraft that we have in Australia. We don't have enough fighters in Australia right now, and while the pilots are bad, they're better than nothing. So I would plan to use the fighters until I don't have them, and then I'll withdraw them when I withdraw them. When we withdraw them, they will go into the pool, the same way that the other P-40 groups that we withdrew did, I believe. So we should get them at the end of it anyway. I know that it might be, hey, why would you throw them into the air and then you lose 10 of them getting shot down? I would rather cover the AP. It is upgradable to an APA, but not till 1943. So I'll cover the AP is worth 20 fighters, the way the victory points work. So we'll do that. Meanwhile, I think we've covered most of what's occurred this turn in this sector here. These guys are still unloading. They're taking forever to unload over the beach, although it does look like they've finished unloading the troops. So the Indominus, which is a slightly less valuable AP, and the cargo, the merchant ship, or the auxiliary guarding it, have finished unloading the 28th Australian Battalion. They have now started unloading supplies. They've got 1,000 of it to unload. They are fully detected, so we could use G3M south against them. He could bring the carriers south against them. They definitely could get sunk here, but we need to get some supply into Norfolk Island, so we're doing that. Meanwhile, we finished unloading the base force at Vavou, so the 101st Base Force is now completely unloaded here with all of its equipment and all of that, so that is now effectively upgrading at Vavou. The port is up to 80% toward level 2, and we're up to 31% to airfield level 1, so then we can shift aircraft between Suva and Pago. You can see here we've got a good number of fighters, about 30 some odd fighters, just shy of 40, and 12 B-26s, all in this group here at Pago, and then we've got obviously the large formation in here at Suva. Quite a few aircraft, 157 aircraft, 100 of them are ready. We just recently upgraded our F4 or F2 Buffalo or F3 Buffalo, whatever the Buffaloes were. The VMF 221 was a Buffalo group, had 18 F2A3 Buffaloes. We upgraded them to F4 F3s, and you can see 3 of them are serviceable, 15 are maintenance, but we're getting those upgraded. It's a good squadron too, 66 experience. You can see several pilots up in the 80s and 70s, a very good Marine squadron there. They're upgrading, so we'll have 36 F4 F3 Wildcats when that's all done, along with 17 P-40B Warhawks. Also, 17 of the P-40s that are, 16 of the P-40s that are at Pago can fly drop tanks and can already get over to Suva. So if Suva did get struck, we have some local reinforcements here. The DDs that were at Norfolk already pulled out, so there's no DDs here at Norfolk. The La Trump or whatever, they pulled out back toward Melbourne. I think they already got there. Or maybe not. Where did they go? Do we move them to Sydney? Yeah, they're in Sydney. So the Chew and the La Triumphant. Repair the Stuart in Melbourne. Right now, most of the Melbourne shipyards are being chewed up by our cruisers, or by the one cruiser we put in there. We can set this guy, though. Okay, so that's the situation here. If we swing further east, we've reinforced Penryn Island with a combat engineer regiment. Probably not enough to hold against anything more than a very small enemy formation that he lands here. But if he tries to do like a fragment fast transport thing, we can at least hold our own there. Building up the forts, we're already at level 3. We're a good ways to level 4. So we're making some progress there on Penryn Island with adequate supply over 11,000. Meanwhile, Palmyra got bombarded by these heavy cruisers here. You can see it says they're moving southwest, which would be down in this direction. Also, his carrier task force up here, with the at least 4 fleet carriers over here, are moving southwest as well. So he could be making a move to bombard Christmas Island. We see no indication of him moving any amphibious forces in here so far, so that's good news. But he's probably going to move these guys south, maybe to hit Fanning Island or hit Christmas Island. Christmas Island's better defended, 178 assault value with the 13th Canadian Brigade, although they're all militia troops, so they're not as good. The Palmyra fortification only has 78 assault value. The Marines didn't lose any men, so that's good. They might have lost a few support, but those also might have still been on the transports of theirs that were sunk by the Japanese carriers. This 2nd USMC Field Battalion lost a few guns when their transports were sunk, but the bulk of it got ashore. The Palmyra Defense Battalion has a few units that are disabled, and I think it lost 1 support unit. And then the 4th Marine Defense Battalion, I think they lost 1 rifle squad. Or no, 2 disabled, but no actual rifle squads lost. So overall, the troops on Palmyra didn't get hit that badly by those heavy cruisers that were bombarding there. I'll have to see offline, off camera, what we should do with air groups down there. Meanwhile, I'll probably need to reposition all these subs that are just kind of chilling up here, that we were trying to intercept what I assumed were his tankers. There's 4 task forces here, so he might have brought his tankers with him, which feels risky, right? Like if our Catalinas might not do anything against a heavy cruiser, but I would hope they'd hit a tanker. Meanwhile, also, what do we have mine-wise? We have nothing at Palmyra, but if he does make a move on Christmas Island, we have 436 naval mines. Let's hope he tries to bombard Christmas Island, because I don't think he has any minesweepers with him. That could be a rude awakening for him. We have 1 destroyer that's hiding in port at Palmyra, as well as a patrol craft and an AVD. These guys aren't really worth anything. 2-6 for the destroyer. It's a Sims class, so it's a better destroyer. It's a level 4 anti-submarine warfare. It's got radar too, so that would hurt a little bit, but we get a lot of those. And we've got an AVD, which is worth 5. These guys actually can also upgrade too eventually, so if they survive, we'll pull them back to Pearl Harbor, because they're ready for a destroyer upgrade. They get some K-gun depth charges. Those would be pretty damn good. So let's hope we don't lose the Sims, because we don't have a lot of good destroyers right now. But if I send it to sea, it'll get lost too, so. Moving back to Pearl. Let's see here. We've got the 6 battleships here that are all here. We've got the Oklahoma's 23 days from being back. I should double check my destroyers and see if there's anything that needs to upgrade yet. A Wix class DD. It can currently upgrade. I don't even see, like, is it just better AA? 66 AA? Verse 28? Yeah, okay, I guess. Most of our ship repair is already taken up by the battleships, so I'm not sure how much we really have to spare there. The Clemson DDs could upgrade to something. It's mostly just AA also. I'm not going to upgrade them yet. I'd be curious about moving them to a mine layer or something. There's a lot of conversion options available for them. Pat, I don't think they can get far enough to get out of range. They can outrun the task force, yes, but I don't think they have enough fuel to get anywhere safe. The Farragut class, ooh, that's a good upgrade. They get K-guns too. So most of my destroyers in Pearl are going to go into upgrade, I guess. All right, so we'll leave those guys. I think we already did the rest. All right, we'll do those guys now. Get a fair number of destroyer upgrades. What? No, they don't. I don't want to slow the troop transports, Pat. I'm not gonna charge out that way. Plus, there's a good chance it would expose those groups as well. I don't think they even have fuel to get down there. I mean, I could try. Can they reach anywhere? I'm not going to expose those convoys. Can they get to Pago? Yeah, they could get to Pago. I guess we can try. It's better than just sitting and waiting and being destroyed in port, I suppose. I'm not going to try with the other guys. They'll just stay. But it may also, if he detects them, he may react and then may move south and hit these convoys, which I'd rather him just keep slowly, progressively hitting Palmyra and Christmas and let these convoys sort of get away undetected. This is a single cargo ship, so if it gets hit, I'm okay with that. Actually, it's not a bad diversion either. These other guys are too far out, I think, to get detected. Although if he has any patrol craft on Canton, they may get detected. So far, it's been extremely overcast, and he's not detecting. I think the weather's worked to our advantage out that way, too. Sean Mack, what do you mean by transfer airfields? I do plan to build up a couple of bases to try and use them as transfers so that you can just fly aircraft across. The biggest hindrance is Pearl is too far for most aircraft, so you have to at least ship them to Pearl. I am planning on sending a base force unit out of Fiji, so we've got a bunch of base force units at Fiji. I'm going to pull out the 111th because they've got the best assault value, so they can hopefully deal with a very small SNLF fragment that like a destroyer might bring in. And I'm going to move them in the next couple of days to Raoul Island. And then what we'll do is build an airfield at Raoul, a level 1 airfield at Raoul, and we'll use that as a transfer point to get aircraft up to Vavu and then into Fiji from Australia. We can actually already fly these wildebeests and these Vincents out. They can already reach... Where can they reach? Suva. They can already get to Suva. I don't have any air HQs there to give them torpedoes, though, so it feels like a little bit of a waste. I could have sworn that the rules said that like base force units can supply torpedoes, though, so I'm a little confused on that. In any event. So that's the situation in the Eastern Pacific. And then most of my transports have moved off screen. They're going to take a long time, probably about a month, to get to Australia, maybe a little more via off-map move, but it should get the Americal Division there sometime in early April to reinforce the Australian troops already that are on their way there, without risk of being intercepted by enemy carriers. Could be his play, too, right? Like, he may have moved the carriers in there to force me to reorient my convoys, and then he can make a quick move toward Australia. Once Moresby falls, he definitely could make a play for Australia. I don't think he'd do it with just the one division he has at Moresby. I think between Moresby and New Caledonia or Espirito, he might have a division and a brigade, but I can't imagine he's got sufficient forces to make a play for Australia until the Dutch East Indies fall, or maybe he avoids Java altogether. That seems unlikely, but maybe he avoids Java altogether once Singapore falls. That's why it's so important for Singapore to hold another week. If Singapore holds another week, we'll buy like a quarter of our transit time needed for the American troops on their way to Australia. Sure, if you want to do that, Sean Mack, I can take a look. But I think that's probably about all we've got going on this turn. We can take a look at aircraft losses or other things like that. 6 ops losses for him, 3 for us, 2 destroyed by flak. You can see here we lost 4 Catalinas, probably all 4 that were attacking those cruisers. He lost 2 Kates, which is good. Any ops losses, any aircraft losses his carriers can suffer, all the better. Weakens their strike forces a little bit. Also, his carriers off Australia used a lot of torpedoes, so that's also good for us because that would increase the amount of or how quickly they'd have to return to port. Anella 0, another Catalina for us down here, and actually a 3rd Kate down here, so we lost 3 Kates. In terms of ships sunk last turn, we did lose the mine layer, only worth 2 points. The Dutch ships aren't worth that much, so that's good for us. Interesting that it says a 250-kilogram bomb sank it and not the 2 torpedoes that hit it. Ship withdrawals, I think we're coming up on a few soon. Not that long. We still got over 2.5 months before the Aquinta is withdrawn, and then the Colombo is in 3 months. Other cruisers here in like 3 or 4 months. The Indomitable has to withdraw in just over 4 months, which kind of sucks, but we get another British carrier to come on map before then. Ships available in terms of days left. We get the Hornet in 6 days on the U.S. East Coast, so that's good, but that's probably still a month out from being able to do anything because then it's got to sail from the East Coast to the Pacific. The Wasp on June 10th, that's still several months out, and then nothing after that until 1943. So we've pretty much got the carriers that we want to play with the exception of the Hornet and the Wasp, for the next year. A little bit more than a year before the Essexes start to come online. We get 3 Essex carriers in 43. That's the other reason it's super important for us to kind of hang on with what we've got now, because if we lose our entire carrier striking force now, then even when the Essexes start coming online, we've only got 3 in 43. We don't really start to see the huge rush until 44. Late 43, we get 2, and then in 44, we get another, 5? So then we could have like 7 or 8 carriers by the end of 44. That's a long time to wait, though, if we lose our whole carrier striking force. So, anyway, so Charcoal, just for your awareness, I know you're tracking the Yorktown. Yorktown is over here with the Indomitable, still sailing south, still under the command of Raymond Spruance. Indomitable is the flagship of this group. Yorktown's entire fighter force made it back from Singapore, all 27. The pilots in the Yorktown groups, we've got 4 pilots with 2 kills each. We've got a couple of pilots with 1 kill, and we gained some experience there. Lieutenant Commander Peterson had 1 kill. He's the group commander. There's also Lieutenant J.G. Cromwellan, who is 2 in terms of the number of kills, leading the group. So that's the air group there. The other guys are just all kind of back on the carrier doing their things. Rename them the 3rd and 5th fleets. Or rename who the 3rd and 5th fleet? Oh, these 2 groups? Spruance and Halsey are commanding the 2 groups. We don't need to do it right now. I don't feel like renaming them. Plus, it's a British task force with the Indomitable. We're not going to name it the third fleet. Lannistar, thanks for the follow. PK Bosco, also thanks for the follow. Appreciated. All right, guys. I think that's probably about it. What else do you want to see before we wrap up? Charcoal, one thing you did miss was there was another deliberate attack on Singapore. It dropped the forts from 3 to 2. We bloodied him pretty badly. I think he had like 300 squads disabled. Our own forces, we lost about 100 assault value. We lost about 70 squads destroyed. So it was a little bit of a mixed bag there. Oh, by the way, also the Dolphin made it to Singapore and was able to completely replenish her torpedo stores. So that's good. Maybe in case he makes a play for Palembang, we should patrol off Palembang. Okay. We've got other subs that are on the way as well. Does Palembang have any mines? I don't think so. Thought we had mines at one point here, but I see no defensive mines there. Meanwhile, our other subs that are coming off their mining operation off Wang Kao are approaching Singapore as well. And it'd be great to be able to draw resupply here to get them up to full torpedo speed. Torpedo loadouts. Singapore is nicely a level 9 port, which means that you don't need a tender. You can just reload torpedoes there and reload your fuel, which is great because all the fuel that we pull is fuel that doesn't go to Japan when they take the base. See. Anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Sorry for the late drop at the end, but that's where we're at. It's March 5th, 1942, and catch you guys later. Hope you guys enjoy. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.